Hey, what's up guys? I've got a relatively short review that I want to do for you guys, and it's of the Sigma 24 to 35mm f2 lens. Now, I previously recorded this review, but I didn't like the audio quality on it, so I went ahead and I'm re-recording it to hopefully give you guys some better sound. So Sigma's been making these very fast aperture zoom lenses lately that are faster than the typical 2.8 that we see. And they've really had me curious about what kind of quality they would deliver. I think there's currently 3 of these fast aperture zoom lenses out on the market. 2 are for crop sensors, and the 24 to 35 is actually for a full frame camera body. So I wanted to give it a shot and see how well it worked out. And I gotta tell you, I'm extremely impressed with this lens. I wasn't expecting anything too spectacular out of this lens, even though it is getting some praise. I just wasn't expecting a lot out of it. I don't know why. I guess maybe the price point of only being $1,000. It seemed kind of a bargain price for a zoom lens that was at f2 to really be effective, but I gotta tell you, this thing delivered some stunning images. It was incredibly sharp. I've read online where some people have said that the lens is just adequately sharp, that it's not very sharp, and I have to disagree. This lens rivals a lot of prime lenses. I mean, is it the sharpest lens that there is? No, there are prime lenses that are sharper, but it is a pretty darn high quality lens whenever it comes to sharpness and contrast. And it is just more than adequate whenever it comes to the sharpness. Well, the one thing that really surprised me a lot about this lens was the autofocus speed. It was incredibly fast. I was able to photograph kids jumping around in swimming pools and doing all kinds of things, and the lens just kept up. It was accurate, it was consistent, and I was just really impressed with its autofocus performance. I really didn't get hardly any autofocus shots, and when I did, it was always my fault. The other thing about this lens is it focuses incredibly quiet. So for those who shoot video, this lens will be really cool because it's not going to make very much noise, if any noise. So as much as I like this lens, I have to admit I have no intentions of buying it right now. And the reason is simple, the focal range. As somebody who primarily shoots portraits and sports, 24 to 35 really doesn't fit my workflow all that well. Typically 35mm is the widest I'm going to shoot portraits at. If I want to get a nice environmental portrait, I'll shoot it at 35mm. Very rarely am I going to shoot anything wider than 35mm. Maybe once in a while I might have to, use a wider angle lens to get a large group shot when I don't have much room to back up. But for me, I know that I would shoot this lens 90% of the time at 35mm and f2, which is what I did while I had this lens. Almost the entire time I had it, I shot it at 35mm and at f2, because why get a fast aperture zoom lens if you're not going to shoot it wide open? But if that's the case, that I'm going to shoot it at 35mm most of the time, and I know that, I would rather opt for the 35mm f1.4, get another stop of light, and just be happier with another stop of light and cleaner images, or a shallower depth of field, whatever the case may be. But for those who know that they're going to shoot in this focal range a lot, this is a very viable option. It can replace a 24, a 28, and a 35mm prime lens in your bag. But even though it's replacing 3 prime lenses, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to save much weight or space. This lens is very chunky and it's very heavy. Coming in at about 2 pounds and 1,000 grams, it is a very heavy lens. The 70 to 200mm by Sigma, by comparison, only weighs 3 pounds, and it's a lot longer. So this particular lens, it just feels really solid and heavy, and it is very well built. All of the external parts on it feel very robust, and they feel solid. It doesn't feel cheap at all. The lens feels like it's a tank. So even though you can replace 3 lenses, you might not have a huge weight savings by having this lens, but it would be nice to not have to change lenses. For those who are out shooting landscapes and dusty environments and things like that, maybe you don't want to change your lens and you just want to be able to have one lens that does it all. And this is a very good option for that because the image quality is very good. The other people that I could see this really being useful for is like a wedding photographer or an event photographer, to have this on a second camera body where you're out taking a bunch of shots, and let's say you're getting some nice environmental shots at a wedding reception at 35mm, and then all the bridesmaids get together and they want to take a large group shot, and you don't have any room to back up. You can be at 24mm and get the group shot. And the reason why I would, if I did a lot of weddings or things like that, I would want this lens because the f2 aperture gives you an extra stop of light, which means you can cut your ISO in half and get cleaner images, which is something that to me is a big deal. Because a lot of times at a wedding you're going to have, either a prime lens on your camera body or a 24 to 70. And with this, you kind of get a little bit of the best of both worlds. You do give up some of that focal range that you would typically have in a 24 to 70, but you're gaining the extra stop of light like you would get with a prime lens. So there are some trade-offs, but I could definitely see it be useful for a lot of people. Coming in at right about $1,000, I think this lens is a real bargain for those who are going to shoot in the kind of semi-wide, because it's not an ultra-wide angle lens. It wouldn't be very effective for somebody, let's say, who's doing real estate photography because it's just not wide enough. But it's giving you a short wide angle focal range there, and I think it could be effective for certain people. So in terms of the other technical stuff that people typically get into in reviews, like the vignetting and the chromatic aberration and stuff like that, it does have some vignetting with the lens. I don't have a problem with it. I like a vignette on most of my shots anyways, so it's a non-issue to me. And I didn't see much, I don't remember seeing any chromatic aberration. I'm sure that there probably was some, but nothing that really stood out to me whenever I was editing my images. The image quality just looked great to me. As far as distortion goes, it's a wide angle lens, so of course it's going to have it. For me, I don't shoot like architecture or anything like that where it's really that important to me. I shoot people, so as long as I keep the people away from the edges of the frame, I'm okay. So I apologize for not having all the technical specs on all of that stuff or examples, but it's just something that for my workflow, this is my real world review of how I used it. And those just really aren't things that I had time to go out and test this week and really look into. So I'm hoping to get my hands on like the Sigma 50 to 100 millimeter f1.8, which is a crop sensor lens here in the next couple of weeks, and give it a review. That's a lens that really interests me, but I just don't really have a solid crop sensor camera right now, and so I'm kind of holding off until I decide what I'm going to do about an APS-C camera. If I'm going to go and jump into the Sony lineup, or if I'm going to pick up an 80D, I haven't decided yet. But once I get that figured out, I will probably try this Sigma 50 to 100 millimeter out and get you guys a review on that. So I hope that helps you guys out. If you guys have any questions about this lens or anything else, leave me a comment below. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day. This lens is very chunky and it's very heavy. Coming in at about 2 pounds